Okay.
What's your YouTube channel, Lee?
What's that?
What's your YouTube channel called?
Applicology. And I will, first thing I'll do is I'll share the YouTube link in the chat there. And I got to share it in Discord real quick here. Hold on a second.
I'm gonna go watch myself on YouTube. This is gonna be weird.
Like I said, there's about a 10-second delay if I remember right.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Roby's going to try to keep an eye on the YouTube. If anybody does get on there and does any kind of questions via chat, Roby will try to see those questions and bring them into our conversation if we can. So anybody that's listening on YouTube, go ahead and type in the chat and hopefully we'll get it into the system here. Okay, so pretty much everybody knows me. I got a kind of a quick little scripty thing, just kind of set the foundation for what's going on. My name is Lee Kaiser. I started a term slash a website once upon a time called Applicology.org. Applicology is just a word that I made up, standing for Applied Practical Philosophy, the study of APP-ology, Applicology. So I just kind of made it up. I'm all about trying to make a difference. I want it to matter that I was here. I want it to matter that the OPP group and the Thinkers Club group, I want it to matter that what we're doing actually can have some impact. Now, it's got some impact and some fun, of course, to everybody who participates. But I want to try to go to the next level. I want to try to attempt to make some progress on some of these really tough issues. In our normal group, you put up your hands and you kind of go in the order of the hands. When we do that, you know, I may have a response to something that was just said, but if there's 6 hands up, my response doesn't come for 16 minutes, type of a thing. So I'm gonna be the moderator, the chairman, the interrupter. I'm gonna be trying to get definitions on words. I'm gonna try to get definitions on exactly what we're talking about. Nick is labeled as H. Him and I may go round and round a little bit, but all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get clear communication. I'm going to try to get clear understanding of what's going on and try to make some good progress on some of these terms. I believe I want to make a difference. I believe there's a epidemic of anxiety and depression in the world. Really America, because I'm not that worldly, so I don't know a bunch about overseas or anything like that. But at least America, there is a epidemic, in my opinion, of depression and anxiety, which also means suicide. I think that a lot of that comes from not having mission and purpose, not having your own self mission and purpose, not knowing why you're here, having those existential crises, you know, having some of that nihilism dread and all those kinds of things, which I assert can be a lot of it fixed via philosophy, a lot of it fixed via the stuff we're talking about. So this is my attempt at trying to bring something of that to bear. We're going to go at it from a series of hot button topics to begin with, but when we talk about a hot button topic, it's what's going to end up happening, I believe, is we're going to end up going back to, well, why? Because why? Because why? And we'll run those recursive whys all the way back to, well, it's because we're here, or it's because I believe that, you know, humans are on the earth because of A, B, or C, or whatever. So that's what I expect to happen. I started this meeting because I choose to be an active participant for change. Okay, so that's kind of what I want to do. More specifically, I would assume that everybody knows what a standards organization is. ANSI, which is the American National Standards Institute. You've got ISO 9000. You've got SAE. Have you heard of these kinds of things? Right. ANSI is American National Standards Institute, is a private nonprofit organization that oversees the development of voluntary consensus standards for product, services, processes, systems, and personnel in the United States. It is a voluntary consensus standard. What I'd like to do, my keyword or my key term is distilled wisdom. Philosophy is about trying to get wisdom, right? There isn't truth in consensus, but we can agree on hopefully a lot of different things. At some point, you and I may disagree on something. There's a lot of things that we agree on. Then we hit this point of demarcation, and you zig and I zag, and that's fine. We just had whatever our reasons are for picking something different. If we spend our time looking at that point of demarcation and shedding a little light on it and verifying that the assumptions that you made and the assumptions that I made are accurate, have reason, have rationality, have evidence, whatever, maybe we can uncover a few things and put us more on the same page, or obviously possibly I'm less on the same page. Oh, once upon a time, Melissa had I said this to Melissa before, and she kind of took notice to it. We put in hundreds of hours, maybe even thousands of hours over years working on this philosophy stuff. Wouldn't it be a shame if we died and all that knowledge got lost with it, right? If we're all on the same bus and the bus get crashed or whatever, and we lost literally tens of thousands of hours worth of learning, that's not good. So that's another thing is that I think that we should try to make a difference. We should try to create something. What that something is, that's to be determined. Like I said, I'd like for us to be like a standards organization, that we have voluntary consensus of standards. I would like for us to vote on some things. And when we vote on things, I'd like it to be a super majority, not just a simple majority, because then it really can be pretty much any which way. I'd like for it to be a super majority of 67% or more. And hopefully somebody can help do the counting and stuff like that. I am going to try and record what I call our positions. And I'd like to start off the first one with, I say that we are not in the matrix. Does anybody think we are in the matrix?
Can you define matrix?
A computer simulation, whether from our own doing, from somebody on the planet or from somebody off the planet, but I am asserting that we are not in the matrix. As a matter of fact, I added a couple of monitors, and I'm going to get lost on trying to find out what's on what monitor.
The other thing, Lee, are you saying we, this group, or we, civilization?
That is a great question. I am saying civilization, but that is a worthy thing to. I think this is it. It's too small. I can't read it. I think this is it. Is that the matrix one?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
All right. So we. That we do not exist within a computer simulation.
Can I ask something real quick? What difference would it make if the simulation is created by a computer, some advanced aliens, or God? What about if you look at it, religion as as a way to explain that? Like God created these simulations and gave them willpower and set them forth on the earth, and their mission is to find God. Well, I'm saying, what's the difference between a materialistic one and a religious one?
The
Good
way-
point.
The way I've got it worded is existing within a computer simulation.
Okay.
So I don't know that God would use computers. Is
No,
there,
I'm saying the purpose will be the same. Whatever method you use to set this simulation in progress, what would it matter if it's a computer or an advanced alien?
probably wouldn't matter.
Well, with the simulation, it implies that there's a real world, like the movie Matrix. You know, this is simulation, but the real us is sitting someplace plugged in. Is that what you mean, Lee? That by that we're actually sitting someplace else?
I'm saying that we're not in a, that this is reality. This how should I say that? We exist within a shared single reality. Does that make it better?
To me, that's still different than like Matrix, like the simulation, because obviously we are in a reality, but if the question is there multiple realities where we are here in this matrix, but there's another reality also, then that's the question. But if there's only one reality, then this is it. There is no simulation. And kind of like what Jason was saying, this, God created this. What's the difference? But if we're talking about a dual thing, then that's a different question.
So I am asserting that that there is only one reality and we're in it.
What about things like Molinism, where they believe that there's an infinite amount of realities, right? That it's a religious view that there is an unlimited amount of reality and God knows each one. We just happen to be in this one that creates the most people who will find God. We just happen to be in this one, but there's a limited amount.
Sure.
I would simply state it depends on what you're exactly asking me. And I actually think this is a great place to start. That in philosophy, there's I'm a real essentialist. So I typically am more of like a perennial metaphysicist. So the point though is that real essentialism is saying that is reality real and can we know it? Right. And so basically it seems as if Lee is kind of the conception that reality exists and we can know it. Whether there's multiple realities really doesn't matter. And keep in mind, this is the first stepping stone or like the axiom upon which we can use to have any discussion pertaining to, let's say, whether it be the common nature of things upon which we potentially could extract universals if we go that direction. But either way, this is the foundation, just basically saying that we all agree that when we see a coffee mug, we all see a coffee mug and that we exist. We agree that the coffee mug exists. For thousands of years, people have debated what the hell that means. There's no general consensus as to what exactly the external world is and our perception of it. This is deep philosophy where there's no general consensus. So that's what I would say. We just have to basically say that we're willing to accept that there are, as declared within even just the Declaration of Independence, there are self-evident truths. Over.
The thing is, though, I'm wondering, are you not, I think what I'm hearing Jason ask is, you want to exclude the thing of a simulation, but does that mean there is nothing else exists other than, the existence that we have here right now? Is that what you're trying to establish?
Here's a very important point, and I want to make sure everybody is listening to this important point. When I put in the particular verbiage of a position, that's all I'm saying. I am not trying to sneak in things that are not in evidence yet. I am not trying to exclude other things. I want us to make hundreds or thousands of these positions as we build our distilled wisdom. And like a court, Randy, his name is Nick, not Jason.
Well, no, I was talking about Jason Sims. He's the one that asked the question, right?
My fault. So I want us to have, like a courtroom, I want us to build some precedent. I want us to build some things that we can, some foundational stuff that we can build upon. So I am not trying to sneak in anything except for exactly what's written. And if we need to, if I need to exchange or modify what's written, that's fine too. Let's massage it until we've got some piece of wisdom that we can stamp and put in the books, and move on from there. Go ahead, Pam.
So what I understand that you're saying is that you're looking at this as a starting point. You're not saying, you're saying that we are agreeing to this right now. And then based on our agreement, we'll build off of that, which could in fact change this position in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, I get it then.
Any good science can be overwritten with better data, right?
Yep.
I am all about the scientific method. I am all about trying to make things better and better as we go along. We will probably pass some things that are not perfect. We may pass some things at 75%, which would pass in this case, but you know, the people who go against it, the dissenting opinions, need to get their voice too, right? We just may be all sheep in one on some issue, and we may just pass something because we all, you know, it's warm and fuzzy, but then hopefully over time logic will win out and we'll be able to overturn it with better and better science, better and better stuff.
I mean, one of the issues that I see off the bat though, Lee, is that like, I get that the first couple like axioms or presuppositions or whatever you want to call it are going to be the most difficult, because I assume we do desire rational consistency. But even like you say, I am not trying to smuggle anything else in with just this statement. But I mean, the way that I perceive it is I believe language is an extension of rational faculty. So the moment that you write a statement, there's a tremendous amount, like you say, first off, we are civilization. Like, can you define civilization? Do not exist within a computer simulation. Define simulation. We exist within a shared single reality. Define reality. I mean, these are concepts. And my problem is that I like philosophy, and like these are serious concepts that like have been debated for a long time now in philosophical abstract ways, and I have no problem not going down the abstract rabbit hole and making concrete statements. I'm completely okay with that. But implicit within that statement are just assumptions on what reality, simulation, and civilization fundamentally are. Another critique that I would have is I'm not quite sure why you started with our civilization as opposed to just like our experience. I mean, I don't experience quote unquote reality, however we're defining those particular words. I don't experience reality through civilization. I mean, I'm embedded within a social context, no doubt, but I experience reality through my subjective being. And that's been the way to approach. So I would say like we ourselves do not exist within a computer simulation. We exist within a shared single reality. The fact that we make society and civilization is a corollary or antecedent, or like it happens after the fact of like our existence and just our nature. That's what I would say. So like, I think it's hard to basically just say, I'm not trying to smuggle anything in, because within the text itself, there is implicit meaning within words themselves. And if those words need to be defined, then we're kind of like chasing our own tail.
Everything will need to be defined, and I think we should do that. I put in civilization because somebody said something in the very beginning, and that made me add that part. What is the best way to modify this to get it to check as many boxes as we can for now?
Well, to me, it's like, are you just saying basically, if you're just like you first started, we do not exist within a computer simulation. I think we all might understand that. You're not saying that there could be other things that may come in. Are you, or are you just saying that this is the only reality that exists at this moment? Period.
Good questions. Good questions.
Can I clarify what I kind of meant earlier?
Go ahead.
Because I take the religious. I am religious. I believe in God, and I do believe that the rest of rest of the world is a simulation. Animals, rocks falling downhill, they just follow pure physics and mathematics. And I believe humans are the only thing that are endowed with willpower. So in a sense, I believe we live in a simulation of sorts, but we're the only thing that can act otherwise inside of this simulation, if that makes sense.
The word simulation, I think, is tripping me up a little bit on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Pam.
What if you reduce it down to just, we exist within a shared single reality and take all that other stuff out that needs to be maybe defined and start with that? And I'm just making a suggestion to make it easy.
Holy crap. That is way easier. What do you guys think about that?
That's better.
Does everybody know how to vote? Under your, what is it?
Reactions?
React. I don't see
No.
react on my side. Maybe because I'm the host. All right, so there's a yes or no. If you,
Yeah, there is a thumbs up.
what's that?
There is a thumbs up in the reactions.
There should be a
A
yes.
thumb.
There should be a yes or no piece in there too.
Could there be a third answer? Don't know, because for me,
Yeah.
I can't rule it out. I mean, I can't see for sure that we don't live in a computer simulation, but I can't say yes or no because there's no way I would know.
He took that out, I think. Because yeah, that's an agnostic position. I cannot say yeah or no for that. But Lee, yeah, I see the green checkbox, like a white checkbox in a green circle, and an X mark in a red circle for yes or no in the reactions.
And I'm not seeing reactions at all, so I can't help here. Can somebody help us out to try to figure out how to do the voting?
We might just all be able to throw a chat, like put yes or no in the chat.
Yeah, it's in the reactions.
It's in the reactions.
Yeah, it's got two.
It's got your raise. hand.
No, it's underneath. There are
Oh,
check boxes, like a green circle with a check mark.
Try to vote, Vijaya.
Oh, okay.
Do that green circle.
Yeah, you see that?
All right, so so it's marked you as a yes. All right, so that
Yeah,
it does exist. So there's like a yes or a no.
yeah. Right next to it is no. Yep.
So
And then there's a coffee mug for if somebody wants to just use that as a, like, we could say that that's going to be the, I don't know.
let's so before we get going too much further here, that is a good point. I'm looking for distilled wisdom, but this is not going to be proof. This is not going to be about certainty. I don't think that we have, besides math and some logical absolutes, I don't think we have any kind of proof or certainty about almost anything. This is about justified beliefs, right? This isn't saying that nothing, the way it's worded is that we exist within a shared single reality. How about, what if I put the word we appear within a single reality? Does that give us that I don't know part in the fact that it could be wrong?
Yes.
So is this a good way of phrasing it?
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
See, I actually would disagree. The only reason I say that is if we're making axiomatic statements, they really can't be like we appear to. I mean, you could do that, but I think it's less definitive. I would actually say we appear to exist within a shared reality. I would probably get rid of the word single. Only because, like, I mean, obviously our experiences are unique and different. Now, does that make reality fundamentally different? The answer is no, but we certainly do not all experience reality the same way. So like there is difference within individuality, and I believe that those differences are complementary, and that's a good thing, right? Like I need people like you, Lee, and unfortunately, maybe to your chagrin, you need people like me as well. But so I don't know about the single part, only because I think some people could take that way too hardcore literal, and even to try to destroy like differences and distinctions, which would be insane to do it, but some people are insane.
Let me stop you. I'm in
But
agreement.
but that is exactly what we are worried about, that each individual will come up with their own reality and impose it on everybody else. That's
If it's
wokeness.
reality, if it's a shared reality, then I mean, people can. I'm not too concerned with what other people claim, right? I want us to be a standards company or standards organization, nonprofit, of course, 501c3 eventually at some point, that distills some wisdom down into these pieces that anybody who decides to follow us, or anybody who decides to take our standards book and use it in any kind of fashion, or our wiki or whatever the hell we create. This is our distilled wisdom. So I'm not concerned at the moment how other people are gonna misuse it, because we just can't account for all of that.
Okay.
I'm kind of in favor of taking out the word single and just put it, we appear to exist within a shared
Reality.
reality.
Okay.
Any objections to that? All right.
Yeah, like, shared, it seems like a very general word. For some reason, like you need some sort of qualifier around there. I don't know. Single is not the right one. We need something more to make it clear.
In the reality that we perceive, we appear to exist within the reality that we perceive.
Interesting.
But,
Like that? Don't like that?
yeah, it is perception after all. So maybe, yeah, that could be a qualifier somewhere.
But
Um,
perception is not.
Perceived reality, probably shared perceived reality.
But doesn't
It's not
appear,
reality.
yes, appear is saying the same thing.
We appear to.
The other thing I would say, I mean, maybe we could throw the word like external reality, only because like what I've never experienced, and I don't even think there's a word that exists for it, is like if I'm talking to you, Lee, and I'm like, hey, Lee, pass me like the coffee mug. And you're like, what coffee mug? I'm like, the coffee mug right beside you. And then you say, there's no coffee mug beside me, it's a belt buckle. So then you and I start arguing about whether that object beside you is a coffee mug or a belt buckle. Naturally, we ask somebody else to clarify it, so I can call you an idiot or you can make fun of me. And then the third person comes in and says they see a tennis ball. So my point though is that I have never experienced like one object being perceived in three different ways. So we're talking about the idea that, I mean, we can talk about how we don't live in a computer simulation, et cetera, et cetera. Practically speaking, everybody gets up from their chair, goes to the door, reaches for the handle automatically, knowing that you're going to grab the door handle, turn the knob, walk through the door. You're not expecting a black hole to open up at your feet. You're expecting the universe to operate in an ordered way that you've experienced from the time that you were born. So my point, though, is that the idea that we exist within like a shared external reality is incredibly practical, and we live that out every single day. It's only philosophers who start questioning whether we live in a matrix or whether our brains are in a vat. So it's a complete abstraction detached from really anything practical. So I would say that if we focus more on the practical, I think that that's going to be like we appear to exist within a shared external reality. The internal subjectivity and our internal perceptions and feelings and emotions and preferences are distinct to our subjectivity and our experience of that shared external reality. Over.
That's mostly true, but we see color differently. I mean, right, just a few years ago, there was that picture that was going around
Yes.
social media, and
The dress. Yeah.
one person saw, what was it, black and blue, and the other person
Blue
saw
and
white
blue.
and gold. I mean, those are like, and not even like red and pink. I mean, we're talking about completely different colors. And that's not just a subjective thing. I mean, we're talking about objective reality and we're interpreting it, experiencing it very differently. So I do think that these details matter, right? The devil's in the details. So whatever we're going to put down on paper, we better be really sure that we're correct. Otherwise, what are we building on?
What about we appear to exist subjectively within an objective reality?
At the moment, what I'm going to do is I want to have Randy finish up. I think this doesn't solve the whole thing. Like I said, I think this is good enough for the moment. Randy, you get the last word. We'll vote, and then we'll move on to the next piece. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, to me, I'm hearing you, if I'm hearing correctly, I think you're trying to establish that we want to proceed here as though there are no other outside influences, that we are the ones that are discussing, we are the ones that are creating in this particular realm. It doesn't mean that there couldn't be other realms. I hear you saying that you don't want to go on a basis that we are being controlled or manipulated or influenced by someone other than our own minds and selves. That's what I'm hearing.
I hear you, and that's a lot more detail. That's not part of this. I think this is pretty good. Do your voting, yes or no. You can abstain if you want. I vote yes for this. So whoever's counting, try to find those yes or no check boxes. Vote now. Nick, you're voting yes?
Is thumbs up, but not, yeah, he didn't hit the button. So
Yeah.
I see.
You're on your computer.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead,
Sorry
Will.
to interrupt. But I can just see the fact that the statement is we appear to exist within a shared reality doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a matrix. I mean, if we were in a matrix, it would be a shared reality. So if you're trying to vote for or against the possibility of being in a matrix, I don't think that proposition deals with it at all, because it would still be a shared reality even if it was a simulation. Like the most simple way would be, we're not in a matrix.
That's what it was.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do know.
I agree with Will. That was one of the reasons why, like, I didn't really care if we lived in the matrix. The other thing I would say, though, is that if we wait for, let's say, to get 3 propositions, especially if the propositions are like related to each other about, let's say, perception and reality, then I think that might actually benefit. So maybe moving on could actually help clarify this particular statement as we go deeper. The other thing, Melissa, specifically, I agree with you on the color thing. That was actually why I did want to get rid of the word single, because I do know that subjective experience can be massively different. And while color, you are correct, and that is incredibly interesting. But like the example I used was much more radical, like people perceiving 3 different objects.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, what about like schizophrenics who, you know, they think they're in Vietnam and they see bombs and machine guns? How would you classify them?
That's further down the path. That's not covered by this. This is only saying that we appear to be in a shared reality. What Will said is absolutely correct. That shared reality could be the matrix. So we would have to actually pass another thing. But hopefully what you got a taste of is how the specific words are critically important. And that for us to be able to agree on the distilled wisdom that I'm talking about, it's work. It's work that the groups that haven't really tried to do before. Let's go ahead and clear your, can I clear that? Clear all your yeses. Clear all feedback. There we go. Cool, I got a button for that. Roby, you may have a button under the participants, under the 3 dots for clear the things.
Yeah, no,
I don't, but I'm taking notes on things, and that was one of the notes I had. So maybe I just need to have like up permissions or something.
Hey, Lee, can I make one suggestion?
Sure, go ahead.
Like if we're asking a question, maybe like put like a statement about why that is important. Like this statement that we live in a shared reality. Like, why are we asking that question? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are we trying to? Because that would help us with answers also.
Yes, that is true, but we don't have any pre-existing stuff. I'm starting on like number 11 or 12 or whatever, because I've done some stuff in the past that we're not going to get into tonight. I see what you're saying, and that needs to be factored in, and we just need to figure out how to factor that in.
Nader, I'm glad you asked that question because I was wondering that too. So that's why I didn't vote. I want to make sure that my vote did not get casted one way or the other, because I'm withholding my vote until I figure out how this relates to pornography.
So, Melissa and Nader, can we not have a statement that stands by itself? I mean, the only thing we said was we appear to be living in a shared reality. What context is necessary to be able to agree or disagree with that single statement?
The statement is the, I was going to say the statement is the starting point for this discussion or for whatever it is that you're trying to do. This statement is the starting point.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is that it could help with facilitating the answers. Like, you know, if you put some context around it, then that could, you know, like, why are we asking this question? Then people could when they give their answers, they, you know, it could be more in the context of why we're asking that question.
What that does is that attaches the context to the statement itself, which means if I were to use that statement, you know, a year from now, but don't have that context, then what do you, how do you do anything if we need to put some footnotes on something, I guess that's okay. I think it's better to reword it so that it's not fungible, that it's not, you know, oh, you have to know the context of that, or, you know, when we said that, we meant this other thing. It's like, no, everything should be able to stand on its own. And if it doesn't stand on its own, then it's not defined well enough or articulated well enough. And
I see what you're saying, yeah.
The only thing that we're saying is exactly what we're saying. Whatever's in those quotes is the only thing that you're agreeing to or disagreeing to. You're not agreeing to context. You're not agreeing to things that are not in evidence yet. What is a prosecutor in a courtroom? Object, Your Honor, that's not in evidence yet. It's like, that's not part of the discovery. So, okay, it needs to stand on its own. And I don't want to, we are going to make connections between things, right? When we talk about we're not in the matrix, which will be another thing that we're going to have to discuss, we're going to incorporate or connect to this shared experience one, because we were able to agree on that. And there may be 4 other things. Before we can talk about the matrix, we may have to pass 4 other things just to make sure that it's clear.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like stating like a truth, like a truth statement. Any kind of context probably taint that in later. I see what you mean.
Right.
Yeah.
I would also state, I mean, like a triangle, like 3 points are generally like, that's the basic structure. So as you get more axioms, you're going to be able to interrelate. So like things could change also, but I think you do need more content because this is just too basic. And we are reading a lot into what's being said. Like people are saying things that are implied within the statement directly. you kind of like blank your mind out. The other thing I would say, though, the reason that I do think that statement is important is because one of the problems that we have today is that we live in a massively subjective world, like just within America and the West, particularly, where subjectivism or emotivism, particularly pertaining to value systems, which I talk about, ad nauseum, but like it's the idea that like value systems are basically entirely subjective. But if we don't have any sense of like any conception of the objective, then really any argumentation kind of becomes moot at that particular time, because like there's no objective framework to have any discussion about shared values, shared truth. And so it almost seems to degenerate, or at least rapidly lead to this radical subjectivity upon nothing that I say really has any objective validity to like reality itself, or even it doesn't have any demands placed upon you, whether that be morally, culturally, et cetera, et cetera. So like you have to accept to some degree for any rational conversation to exist that there is objective reality that we can talk about in a rational way. So there's a lot to be said there. In fact, as a thing, Lee, I would say, and this would get pretty deep, but one of the second axioms could actually be like, and this would get incredibly philosophical, so I don't know if people want to go that way, is like, what is the power and the capacity of human reason? Can it penetrate to the bedrock of the essence of things? Like, can we know reality? Or is our rational faculties, is the power only reduced to just basically superficial like nonsense? Like we could basically only scrape the topsoil and we can never really know anything, because that's incredibly important to understand if we're going to start talking about truth and the ability to know things. Like, can reason penetrate to truth? Over.
You're absolutely right. I was going towards the porn thing, but this is actually more foundational. Jerry, which may be on YouTube, brought this up back in September. Reality is real. I like to say objective reality exists, but we only have access to it through our subjective experience.
Yeah, that's pretty much the traditional philosophy to a large extent. Existentialism, phenomenology. There's massive philosophy that pretty much operates exactly on what you just said. That is incredibly simpatico with most of the Enlightenment and tremendous amounts of modernity. So yeah, that's.
What do you guys think about this statement? The subjective reality exists, but is only accessible through our subjective experience. So we're bringing into being, we're bringing into the stack, we're bringing into the database two concepts. Well, actually three, because exists is a troublesome word, but objective reality exists, but is only accessible through our subjective experience.
Don't know about only, maybe mostly. I wouldn't say only.
So give me an example of something that's outside of objective reality.
Well, I wouldn't say that. What I would say, and I don't know if Dahlia, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Dahlia, but it's pretty commonly accepted that like scientific instrumentation is almost an extension of our of our physical senses. So like I can measure voltage in an electric field. And yeah, I measure voltage, but like to say that that's part of my subjective experience, I would say, because I'm reading a voltmeter, but like I didn't directly experience through sensory perception. So as long as our subjective experience is not confined and reduced to sensory perception alone, then I think we would be okay.
Robbie.
I was going to say, just in general, I think mathematics is objective. It doesn't matter what reality you're looking for, and the numbers are going to count up.
Right.
I like to conflate the words or the term objective reality with facts. Do you guys like that conflation?
I would not say facts. I'll even go ancient here and talk about it in like terms of cosmic. So like the ancient Greeks and even a lot of even through like the Middle Ages, cosmos is like cosmic order. They actually view the universe as like this ordered kind of whole. And then so you had parts of the ordered whole, but the parts were actually like, they were kind of ancillary or like secondary to like the cosmic integrity of just like existence and creation as a whole. So I would say something like, objective reality is just like cosmic existence, that which fundamentally exists that we interact with every day, right? Including that which we do not know and understand. So to simply state that like, we know objective reality exists, but like our experience and our knowledge of it is certainly abductive. It's incomplete data sets, right? We don't have the totality of understanding of that. But I would go with cosmic just because I think it's pretty cool.
So would it be fair to say that our supermajority agrees that we seem to be living in a shared reality?
We already voted on that one, correct? Pam?
What about, I feel like you're trying to, I mean, not you, but I feel like we're trying to qualify that objective reality exists. What if we just, like JMJ said, you just clear your head, and what if we just say objective reality is accessible by the subjective experience, period?
So repeat that, please.
Objective reality is accessible by the subjective experience. Not ours, not that it exists.
Okay, hold on a second.
Do you want me to say it one more time?
Yeah, say it one more time.
Objective reality
Yeah.
is accessible by the subjective experience. And it's just a suggestion. So, I mean, just to clean it up a bit, I guess.
By saying objective reality is, that assumes exists. But
True.
I think that's cleaner. I think that's a little more elegant. James then Will.
Hey, so this is my first time in the group, so I'm not exactly sure of the format, but I just wanted to make a comment that when we're talking about reality, one thing that I like to think about is from a phenomenological perspective. Even if we can't say anything about what really exists, because all we have access to is our own mind's projection, we can still make statements about our own mind's projections and how they seem to kind of follow from one event to another.
If we were to agree that we are in a shared reality, and every time we have confidence that when we grab the cup, I grab in the cup or somebody else grabbing the cup, it is the same cup. If we can use that as a foundation, we can then start talking about objective experience, but it has to come first with some shared axiomatic foundational pieces. You say, well,
Sorry, was that me? Yep.
Good.
Yeah, I thought that position was better the first time. Objective reality exists, but is only accessible through our subjective experience. Makes more sense to me than objective reality is accessible by the subjective experience, because the second one is inferring, to me, it gives the impression that we have an ability to grasp objective reality, whereas objective reality is forever going to be beyond our subjective experience. But that's sort of giving the impression that objective reality is accessible. I don't think it is accessible. It's always subjective, but it does exist. But we can't have a knowledge of objective reality. It's impossible. We only have a subjective experience of reality. So I'd just say we have a subjective experience of reality.
you convinced me. I'm back now in the first position. Go ahead, Roby.
Yeah, I was just going to say a definition of accessible might be important. So essentially what we're saying is objective reality can be accessed by the subjective experience. Is that what we're saying? or
What-
can only be, can be, or can only be, or what does
I-
accessible mean?
with what Will was saying, it's like, I don't know if all we've got is a subjective experience, do we have actual accessibility to objective reality, or are we forced to look through our lenses with our biases and our cognitive errors and our sense data errors? I like trying to separate that objective reality is a something that we can try to access, that we can try to understand, that we can try and learn things about, but it is possible to be forever outside of our objective understanding. It's kind of messy. Who was that? Was that Roby or Nick? You're up next.
Yeah, so the one thing I would say real quick, I think it was Randy, you had mentioned about shared reality, and it seems as if you were under, I don't mean to put words in your mouth if I misunderstood you, that I think it was hard for you to understand how shared reality can equivocate to subjective experience, but it's like, you can have a shared reality that's large, and our subjective experience is just a small part of that. So the idea that shared reality and subjective experience contradict each other and invalidate each other is just not true. I would simply state that. Furthermore, as far as accessible goes, I assume the word was self-evident, but I would say if we need further elaboration on it, generally speaking, most of us would see our access to the world through our sensory perception. It is also why, though, Lee, I said external objective reality or external reality, the idea that the world outside of us is accessible primarily through our sensory perception. It's also why I mentioned about how scientific instrumentation is generally perceived to extend our sensory perception so that we can actually experience or at least know what's happening in the very small or the very large, or in places that we cannot physically be. We can look at a telescope and see Jupiter, but we're clearly not near Jupiter. So I would simply state that. Furthermore, as far as phenomenology was brought up, which thank you, James, but I also do disagree with Will and even to James, there are branches of phenomenology and even existentialism that will admit that we still do have access to objective truth even through subjective experience. Now, this goes back to the statement that I had articulated earlier about what is the power and the capacity of reason, because that matters to the degree upon which is our human nature, is our perceptive faculties and our rational faculties kind of like a USB plug into a computer where it fits perfectly into nature to the degree upon which power and data can be transferred with high fidelity? Or is it not? Are we just looking at shadows and mirages and stuff like that? And this is a huge difference between, I would say, much of certain philosophical fields. Furthermore, I would simply state that another example, since I've mentioned recently that when we look at mathematics, as Roby had brought up, it's interesting how math is pure formal logic. And it is that pure formal logic that we literally use to model the most complex aspects of the universe, the most mysterious and untouchable, inaccessible through sensory perceptions. It seems as if our rational faculties, our higher reasons, literally are designed and built to comprehend the quote unquote mathematical relations of the universe in deep and profound ways. And if that doesn't show this idea that our mind and our sensory perceptions are fit into nature to a high degree that allows us to access truth, the fact that we do access it through subjective experience does not obliterate the idea that we have access to objective truth. That is debated. Thousands of years of debate have discussed this.
Does the saying that we have access to it, is that the same as we understand it? No. Okay, so I'm thinking of Alvin Plantinga's idea of evolution and naturalism. And the way I understand it is it doesn't matter what you understand as long as you act a certain way. So it could all be a lie. It could be a totally different movie playing in your head compared to what's going on outside. But as long as your body acts in accordance to what is necessary to survive, it doesn't even matter what you know or perceive or have access to. You could just be going I'm thinking you're in a Tesla car, you're pretending you're driving, but you're not, You're moving the steering wheel, but it's the car doing everything. you're not dodging, and everything in front of you is not true. The way I understand it.
Will, you got your hand up?
Thank you. Me? Yep, sorry. That last audio was a little bit dodgy. I could understand it, but I don't know if it helps to bring that to people's attention, because it's a bit disconcerting when you kind of really got to focus to catch the words because of poor audio. So maybe it's a good idea to actually call that out. Maybe mine's not too good either, in which case, please let me know. I was going to say that we need to establish what objective reality is, obviously. There seems to be a bit of confusion about that. And I would say, you know, we have evolved 5 senses, 6 senses if you include the mind, which is absolutely, for want of a better word, miraculous. That, you know, like if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? No, it doesn't. Not unless there's an ear to perceive it. So we have 5 senses, 4 of which are in our heads. In our, actually, the top part of our body are 4 of our senses with which we navigate our primate's environment. The 5th sense is tactile, which runs right throughout the body. And then arguably the 6th sense is the mind, which is like an overview of the others. But other than that, so what I'm saying is everything in the universe is waves and particles, as far as we know, waves and particles and energy. And we have evolved 5 senses to navigate that. Other species have different senses. Dolphins and bats have echolocation, for instance, which quite miraculously has evolved from mutations in the DNA molecule with which to navigate a universe that's 90 billion light years wide. So when you say objective reality, we have not necessarily any idea what objective reality is, even as per what is available to us subjectively, because we've only evolved these 5 senses, which may not give us a very true indication of reality at all. We just happen to have 5 senses because it's helped us get our DNA into the next generation. That's all it is, and that's all nature wants. That's all life is about, getting your DNA into the next generation, whether it's in an ant, a bull elephant, an antelope, or a virus. It's all about replication of the DNA. And if there's any miracle in the world, it's right there.
You're way downstream from what we're talking about. Right now, we're only talking about.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. It's just we've got objective reality, and
fair enough.
We've got our access to it is tenuous because of our subjectivity.
5 senses, yeah.
Right. That's all this is saying at the moment, right? Is that there is an objective reality, and it's on the other side of our senses, and some of the logic that Nick was talking about. Go ahead, Nick.
I meant to say this earlier. I'm sorry. I got caught up in what I was saying. I actually do prefer the first statement over the second statement. And the reason is because when we say our subjective experience in the first statement, it's very clear what the subject is. Whereas the second one, there is no subject. It's like objective reality exists outside the perceiver. It's accessible by the subjective experience. But the only people who have subjective experiences are human beings, possibly animals. But you need a mind there. You certainly need a mind. And so the idea that the human being is actually like fundamental to the subjective experience is, I think, self-evident. So even just by saying subjective experience, you're applying an individual human being. So you might as well just put our. And it also is the idea of the individual, where it's the individual who does that subjective experiencing. So the word "are," I think, just really clarifies what's implicitly assumed. And the phrase "the subjective experience" is a pretty strange phrase for me personally. So that's all I'll say. Over.
I like the first one too. We've been talking about this for a while. Everything is provisional. We can go back and fix anything. I like the first one pretty darn well. Let's vote on it. Let's vote. Yeses for the text of the first one. Objective reality exists, but is only accessible through our subjective experience. Yeses and noes. Yeses and noes. Vote now. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yeses and 1 no. Any last minute votes? 10 yeses and 1 no. Last minute votes.
There may be people still figuring out how to vote because there's about 5 haven't voted.
There's been some new people coming in, so that's very possible.
Okay.
I'm not recording who voted for what, so it doesn't, although it's on YouTube, I guess.
Do you want to give the dissenting, the person who voted no, do you want to give them a time to explain why?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Go ahead, James.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree that we can say with any epistemological truth that objective reality exists. So I don't agree with that statement. Not that I'm saying that objective reality doesn't exist. I just don't think that we can say that objective reality exists. So that's why I voted no.
I'm going to put down as a dissenting opinion. We can't say that objective reality exists. Is that enough, or do you want me to add more?
Yeah, that's
Not a problem. At some point, we'll have shared documents and people have access, and we'll get into more of the foundation, the foundational stuff. Brian's got his hand up now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I think it's 11 now. All right, so. Where'd it go? What was on? Excuse me for technical difficulties here. 1 second. Did I get it? Do we got porn on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Looks
So-
exactly like porn. Yeah.
All right. And go and erase clear all feedback. Okay. All right. So let's take a half a second here. We've now processed and have got 2 pieces of distilled wisdom in our database. What do you think? How does it feel? Is this worthy work to be done? Is there, you've gotten a good taste of it now, right? That the words are super, super important. How it's worded is super important. Just some thoughts and feedback. Good idea, bad idea. What's going on?
No, I like it. I think it's excellent, and I've learned something already.
Awesome.
Just how important it is to agree on definitions.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, because we still haven't got to come close to a definition of an objective reality. I don't believe, but really good. I love it.
So with it being so tenuous or troublesome to come up with wording for next Wednesday, I invite everybody to come up with any kind of written, articulated position on anything that you want to that is worthy to be in our database. This is about trying to chip away at the big block of marble until we have something that takes form or takes shape. And it's going to be a lot of little chips here and there, and it's going to be a lot of this foundational stuff. And like I said, we may have to go back and fix some things or adjust some wording here or there. Once we've got positions and those positions are up for review, throughout the week, we can say, hey, it'd be better if we did this, and maybe there's some forum or Discord or something that we can discuss it, debate it. Anyways, we're supposed to talk about porn. Nick and Melissa were talking about this at the other group and had some opinions. I'm going to give the floor to them to start with, if they're willing to put. I don't have what the position is. Can you guys help us formulate a position that we can take a stance on?
My thing on porn was actually, the porn was really only an example of a deeper problem. So the argument that I had made was the idea that I think in our country, we've lost any legal conception of the common good, or any conception of the common good just in general, right? And so the idea here is that, as an example, I said, we know that porn is massively destructive. It correlates with high rates of anxiety, depression, loneliness. Porn is just very bad for the individual. In that particular sense, I see there's no collective good that comes from pornography. Therefore, the production, the distribution of pornography should be illegal in accordance with the common good. So it was the idea, porn was the example of how generally most people in the West are unwilling to use, let's say, a conception of the common good enforced by law. And then we wonder why civilization is kind of unraveling. And it was also used to show how we're so dependent on this idea of individual autonomy, and what I would consider to be radical conception. So the argument really is more about the loss of the common good, and the porn example is one issue. Now, the idea, though, is that a criterion kind of emerges here when we start talking about concepts of, like, how do we determine what behaviors and actions are good, and then how do we legislate against them? And that is a decent question. So I would give an example real quick, is that, like, obviously there are a lot of behaviors that lead to anxiety, depression, suicide, and loneliness, and you can't legislate all of them. A good example would be premarital sex. More generally speaking, the more promiscuous an individual is, the less happy they are when they settle down. But I have no desire to make fornication or premarital sex illegal, because that would be insane. So just because you have behavior that has high anxiety or depression rates does not mean that there should be legislative action taken. So this is not an absolute statement that, like, depression, that behavior that has higher correlations to depression or anxiety should be legislated against. It's not a blanket statement. But specifically, porn is that issue at hand. But it is an example of just the loss of the common good within our society, and the ability and the willingness to legislate against it legally. Over.
So before Melissa goes, if she's planning on going, I'm going to put a link to the live document that I'm working on. I'm going to give editor permission at the moment. Nick, feel free to jump into that document and try to. You were saying a lot, and I was trying to keep up with you, but I obviously couldn't, because there's a lot we're going to have to break down. This particular concept is a higher level concept that's going to have a bunch of dependent concepts that go to prop it up. So here's that link. Feel free to jump in here, anybody, and help try to get the whole bottom part is just going to be for us to thrash around the concepts, and then we'll take a position. So it sounds like you're talking about the production distribution of porn should be illegal is kind of what you're saying.
Well, actually what I'm saying is that we've lost, it's more of a critique at our society that we've lost any conception of the common good. The pornography is the example of how we don't really have a conception of the common good. And this is clear in liberalism. I mean, the philosophical foundations of liberalism was about effectively, like, reducing the common good to its most, like, to its, like, reductionist form. Because, I mean, obviously, if you have stronger legal frameworks of the common good, it's going to infringe upon individual liberty. This is self-evident within the porn example.
Can give me your definition of the common good? Because you've used that term many times already. What does that mean to you?
I mean, I would just basically say that the common good is that which makes community thrive. I guess in a simplistic way.
That
It supports the community. It supports humanity at large.
Humanity is different than community?
Well, I mean, humanity is on an infinite scale, right? It's all of the planet, and it's the person sitting next to you. Per my definition.
Okay. Okay.
There's also Greek conceptions that would talk about the common good in a particular sense, where it's like they would talk about it in terms of human flourishing. So like in the Aristotelian sense, virtue is implicit within the individual, because Aristotle saw virtue as like the frontline defense against tyranny, where the individual had this idea of like freedom for, right? Not just freedom from. So there's like, we could even talk about the discussion of kind of like a more detailed conception of freedom, like the two sides of freedom, right? Positive and negative freedom, as Isaiah Berlin would say, right? So there's an idea that there's a more comprehensive conception of freedom, and we tend to be one-sided, that I'm free from any external constraint to do whatever I want, but we're never free for, and particularly free for, let's say, to manifest virtue, to control our own impulses and desires. And so it's this idea of human flourishing. Now, undergirding this for very clearly, especially in the Aristotelian sense, and is the idea that there is human nature and not just some human condition. Over.
So let's start by trying to define. I know you guys have, I've talked about my prism before. Basically, it is a assertion of mine, and that assertion is, where do I have it listed here? That any evaluation, which anything talking about porn is going to be an evaluation, but any evaluation, I assert there needs four things. It needs the subject to be evaluated. It needs a point in time that things long ago may be different than an evaluation of today. It needs a perspective, and it needs a standard to evaluate against. One of the things that this porn question is going to have is going to be the perspective. We've got things that are for the individual and or good or bad for the individual. That's one perspective. The community, when you talk about the community is different than humanity, which is one of the reasons why I brought that up. Our community, our society, our culture may be benefited or harmed by porn, but that's a totally different question than us personally being harmed by it. I think that we personally have the right to be wrong. I think we have the right to hurt ourselves. I think that our liberties should end when it affects somebody else's liberties, but I think you should be able to be wrong and hurt yourself. So I just want to make sure in this particular porn statement, can we define the perspective as society, culture, or the community versus the individual? You're shaking your head, Nick. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to just monopolize anything. I personally would not, but we could bifurcate the argument. And what I mean by that is, like, we could talk about it on an individual level and then also talk about it on a collective level. But it's negative for both, right? And this also touches upon a really good argument about, like, Lee, you pretend, well, I don't want to say that, but like, it seems as if you have drawn this firewall between like what an individual does and then the effects that it has on the community. So I can sit there, poison myself, be as toxic, and do all of these negative things to myself, to what I believe to be like my objective human nature, right? And the idea then that this isn't going to have social consequences, right? So it seems to be that you've almost compartmentalized or isolated. So this kind of reminds me of C.S. Lewis talked about this, where he has the 3 parts of morality. I'll post a video that's just on YouTube. It's a really good channel as a whole, but it's like the 3 parts of morality by C.S. Lewis. It's just a YouTube video where they just read from Mere Christianity, but it's like 10 minutes. But it's like, you have a fleet of ships and they're sailing to a destination, and that is, let's say, society or civilization. But the journey or the voyage is only going to be complete if all the engines are working properly, if all the rudders are in alignment. So if you're a particular ship and you go wrong, the chances of you colliding with another ship are incredibly higher. So the idea that we can isolate individual behavior from the communal good, and this isn't me trying to push some radical collectivism, because I'm not a socialist or a collectivist of any type, but it's like today, it seems to me that the radical autonomy and individuality, what I consider to be radical autonomy and individuality, is really pulling the country apart, where we're losing any sense of community, and we're even becoming detached really from ourselves to a large extent. Now, that would be a different issue, but I think you could talk about both, but I also do not think that they are as separate as it appears you want them or are making them to be, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. Over.
I think I'd like to speak to this. I will agree with you. I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is, but I agree that I think what it is I think there should be an unwillingness. Well, I don't know. I think society has demanded there be an unwillingness to assert what an individual should or shouldn't be doing. At the same time, I do agree with you that, and that's not stating whether that's not, that's not judging what you think about that. I'm saying right now society is demanding people not assert what people can and can't do in their own personal time. But I also wholeheartedly agree with you that what the individual does with their own time very much has a bearing on humanity. And the problem is when somebody's personal activities begin to intersect and interact with the people around them. And I think the deeper issue is well, the background of that is, what are we talking about? Whether or not somebody can and cannot do something, or whether somebody should and shouldn't do something. Because I think on the one hand, people should not be doing anything like that. People should not be doing things that are quote unquote wrong, because they're wrong because they will intersect with the rest of humanity in a negative way. And that's what I believe is something that's wrong or bad. And then whatever the converse of that was, I kind of lost my train of thought. But I think those are points to consider.
All right, so what we have here is a complex situation with multiple parts. We're not going to, we don't even have a particular position that we can really wrap our heads around. Let us figure out what the constituent parts of this argument are. And with Roby, I figured out how to do a whiteboard, but I'm not seeing the whiteboard now. I don't know why the whiteboard is gone. What I can do is I can just pull up a, I can just try to do it in here. So
you have to stop screen share to maybe do it.
Maybe. Oops. Break out. Oh, here it is. Whiteboards. Okay.
I think a worthy place to start here would be to discuss whether or not what the individual does alone has an impact on society, or whatever scale of humanity you want to look at.
It can have an impact. It doesn't have to have an impact, right? A hermit in the woods.
I think that would be the argument.
That would be part of it, though.
I would say it.
I would say that's kind of like a slippery slope, because we live in a democracy and individual rights are very important in this country. I think the question really should be asked is, scientifically, can we prove that pornography harms society? I mean, Nick mentioned that, yes, like the example of the boat, one person's efforts makes, whatever they do in their personal lives affects the larger society, potentially in a bad way. But are we willing to give that up for freedom? And I think the question is, how much harm does it do? Maybe it's it's like a trade-off. We accept that some one unit in the society can do some harmful things, but having democracy is more important, individual rights. But if one person starts creating, for example, anthrax in their basement, obviously that should be banned, because that's like really serious harm to the whole society. But if an individual watches porn in their basement, it's questionable that, you know, to say that we're going to ban porn, take their freedom away, because it's really in some way it's going to propagate and it's going to be bad for society. You know, I think there should be, the standard should be, there should be a high bar before the society bans individual freedoms.
Okay, so I would say that so then how is there anything wrong with that person making anthrax if they just incinerate it when they get done and never do anything with it? Is it still wrong? Is it still bad for them to do that? Should they still not be allowed to do that?
Well, it's dangerous because it could leak, right? I mean, anthrax is so lethal that it's if it was safe, if we could guarantee that it's safe, then yes. But I don't think in that case that you cannot guarantee that it's so dangerous that society has to.
But now you're just getting into hypotheticals. If something goes wrong, that doesn't mean. I mean, if.
Well, yeah, but it's about acceptable risk, isn't it? Because something can go wrong with anything, and there's always risk involved. So it's acceptable risk, like that. I could have a pet rabbit, and in Queensland, where I live in Australia, it's unacceptable to own a rabbit because they breed like rabbits, and they are dangerous to the wildlife. So, you know, but if that was, say, a pet mouse, well, that's fine, because mice aren't considered to be a threat to the local wildlife, apparently. So it's not so much the risk as opposed to the connotation or the damage that it can cause. So what I'm saying is there's always going to be a risk no matter what you do, but
exactly. That's exactly right, Will. That's what I was saying. It's like the society has to determine the level of risk, right? You know, you have to base things on probability. You can't just say, well, you know, there's a probability that the anthrax is not going to leak. Somebody can burn it, but are we willing to take that risk, even though the probability is low? I mean, it's kind of like common sense kind of a thing, you know. It's like we trade our freedom for high risk situation. In that case, it's not worth it, right? But porn is arguably, you know, let people, you know, do that, and it's not gonna. There may be some larger harm, but the risk is so low that it's, you know, taking freedoms from people, that's higher risk, because that's a slippery slope kind of a thing.
All right,
I think we should talk about what is a freedom.
Hold on, let's. We need to try to distill stuff. And there's been a couple of raised hands, and we're violating that sanctity of the hand raising. What I'm going to be looking for is I'm going to be looking for a foundational piece of our legislation that some kind of positions that we can pass that will build to being able to pass this one. This one I think is this one, and all the tough ones may take us a while to get to because of this foundational work. So I'm going to want to try to, I want you guys, and we want to try to find some things, some stones in the wall that we're going to build, some parts. Roby, the Nick, go ahead.
I was going to say two things. One of them logistical. I have a ton of questions. Do you want me to just add them directly to the doc, or do you want me to put them in chat and then you can look through it and put them in the doc? I don't want to.
Put them in the doc. Put them in the doc so I can reference them.
Great. Okay. And then the actual question I was going to ask was, or probably statement to make. It seems to me like the best way to go about this is we're essentially coming at this from two different arenas, one of them being the moral, should we, ought we to do it, and the legal and practical. And I think it's probably good to dissect both, or to separate both of those, isolate both of those, and talk about them. We're making moral determinations on whether things are good or bad, but that has nothing to do with, well, or do we just censor all of the internet? Do we censor all of TV and movies? So yeah, I think we need to separate how we talk about it into practical, legal, and moral.
Legal and moral. And legal is obviously something that is about the community. Moral is about the individual, right? Is that fair?
I'd say legal means it's acceptable.
Well, sure, and not just by law, but like practically, applicably as well, right? Because to stop, we're not like, if we censor it in the US, it doesn't mean it can't come from Russia or anywhere else unless we start technically shutting off parts of the internet or stopping, movies from coming over on a boat from China, say, or whatever. So there's like a practical aspect of it too that doesn't even necessarily have to do with legal. It just is a logistical standpoint.
All right, Nick. How do we cut to the quick down here? What can we do? Help us distill this monster problem into some chewable parts.
All right. Well, first off, I want to comment on the morality of what I would call nonsensical production of anthrax, because that's incredibly interesting and funny. I would say that it is morally reprehensible, not really from any particular sense, simply because anthrax is incredibly detrimental. And I also, being a metaphysician, I like teleology, like what is the purpose of something? Generally, whenever we do something, there's a purpose there. So to produce a chemical as dangerous as anthrax for really no reason other than to destroy it, to me seems morally reprehensible. Would I live and die on that hill? No, but it is a fun intellectual argument. I would also state if you made a mistake and died, and then people got to come in and find your body, like they could potentially be exposed because the assumption would be that anthrax got out. Now, I don't know its half-life, et cetera, but either way. Interesting, so kind of glad you brought that up. One of the things I want to say is maybe I should just start with this, is that these are just assumptions that I hold, just so you kind of understand where I'm coming from better, is that like, I do believe that our existence is incredibly heavy, that when we are born, there are a tremendous amount of responsibilities that are just intrinsic to existence themselves. And many of them are moral. So it seems to me that today in our culture, there seems to be a lot of discussion as to like, how do we create systems, structures, and government organizations and agencies to offset our moral failings, the consequences of our moral failings? Now, that's a different issue, but I do believe that there's a couple things to say. So I think that's important for me just to understand that existence is heavy, and I don't seek to run away from that heaviness of existence and the demands placed upon us. And so if you think that the solution is going to be full of rainbows and cotton candy clouds, that's not my default position. It's generally going to be hard and force you and demand certain things upon you. So that's very clear. The other thing is that there is the idea of freedom. I think the idea of freedom between positive and negative liberty would be very beneficial. That's Isaiah Berlin's conceptions of it, positive and negative, though it does go back to Aristotle as well, but we could talk about that and that would be beneficial. There is another thing I want to say. When I talk about Roby, you had brought up the morality of pornography. And we can talk about that, but more specifically, I would simply state that my belief that pornography is destructive really comes more from psychological data, and the idea that we actually have hard data to show that people who have either porn addiction or watch more porn have higher anxiety rates and depression. I want to be clear about one thing. Correlation does not mean causation. I am not making, nor I don't think any psychologist, though Melissa, if you're more familiar with the data, please chime in with the data aspects, right? Or anything. But like, so to simply state that there's a high correlation between watching pornography and depression and anxiety does not mean porn is causing anxiety and depression. It might mean people who are anxious or depressed watch more porn. And this goes back to the mental health crisis. We talked about this the other day in the group. The idea is that we all know we have a mental health crisis. Lee mentioned at the very beginning the anxiety, the depression, and just the social isolation. And it seems as if there's fundamental defects within our culture and our society that has isolated us. And instead of addressing those person to person, face to face, heart to heart, tear for tear, snot bubble for snot bubble, crying and weeping with someone who's going through difficult times, it seems as if all we want to do is just allow them to exercise their freedom in what I would consider to be a pernicious and a destructive way. So the idea that people who are isolated and lonely seem to seek more pornography is just like, let's just band-aid our problems and like kind of suppress this numbness and this like loss or this loss of my humanity. Like I feel alone and isolated. On a side note, like young isolated men, and somebody had brought up the incel community the other day, which incels involuntary celibacy. It's like a subculture, from what I understand, of men who are like, they can't get girlfriends. And in some cases, rightfully so. They're like 30-year-olds who live in their parents' basement, have really not much to offer. And that's sad and terrible. But radical, like young isolated men are the ones who primarily become radicalized. That's a problem. So the idea that, you know, we're almost just like, we have a cultural system that seems to not want to fix the fundamental problems, but just hide behind this idea of tolerance of individual liberty and freedom. I can't remember who said it, where they were talking about the slippery slope of infringing on individual rights. I completely agree with you. It's incredibly difficult. And this is why it's a community endeavor. It's not like one person would have any say. Furthermore, I would simply state off, there's always trade-offs. So should we seek radical freedom and autonomy at the sacrifice of truth? Should we murder truth for freedom and autonomy? Can men have babies? Right? What about freedom? Real quick, one more thing. Like when it comes to freedom, should we sacrifice individual health and the actual human experience for radical freedom? And by the human experience, like if the totality of human experience is the right to watch pornography, I could only mourn one's conception of humanity, because it's like we are so much greater. Furthermore, I would also state, when it comes to other aspects, this is more corollary, but like you would have to, I mean, I would like somebody to make some semblance of argument about what social benefit does porn have? Logistically, Roby, I actually would support filtering the internet from porn, and that's incredibly dangerous as well and incredibly difficult. And that's why it would take a lot of people to figure that out. But I would support that. Over.
Okay. What Nick, what you do is you give a lot of information. You give so much information. We could come up with 175 different positions that could be all of the bricks in the wall that you're trying to establish, or into the sculpture that you're trying to do. I want to try and chip away at this problem. I want some kind of micro piece. What can we agree on? What can we vote on and have a supermajority that is related to this subject that moves us 1/2 an inch closer to being able to make any headway on this? Otherwise, we're going to end up in a very large porn discussion, like all the rest of the discussions. There's a bunch of stuff bandied around, and there's actually nothing getting done. So I'm looking for the specific small nugget that we could pass. Go ahead, Dahlia.
So, first of all, there's the question, okay, pornography is a very wide thing. Freedom is important. And then you have to ask the question, the moral question is, who are the participants who play in the film? Are they are they part of human trafficking? Are they forced into it? What exactly is happening there? So it's not so much what you watch, but who is paying the price for that? Does it make sense?
Is it okay? Let me try something. Can we agree that porn is popular?
Yeah.
And on the rise?
On the rise because of the internet. Yeah.
Is that something we can get behind?
Yeah.
Vote now. Porn is popular and on the rise. Roby, I think I think I want you to be my sound effects guy. So we go into the was it Jeopardy?
Yeah.
All right.
Who's whistling? They should do it. That was good.
Cast your votes now. Cast your votes now. You're abstaining, Roby?
Do I need to note that I abstain?
No, I just want to make sure everybody's got a chance to vote that's voting.
I'm posting things in the chat. You asked about like little tidbits we could agree on. I'm posting things in the chat.
Perfect.
Dude.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Are we-
11, 12. We've got 12 yeses and 0 nos.
Yeah, I don't know about the on the rise. I'd like to see data on that, but like you said, we could change it at any point in time. So I'll agree with it until data is proven otherwise. I assume it's on the rise.
All right, so we're gonna call this.
Are we going to come up with possible upsides for porn just for the sake of the debate?
I don't know about during this meeting.
No, I mean, seriously, you know, are there any, can anyone think of positive side to it?
No, Will, that's an important point. I actually asked that too. I was like, look, I just don't see any social positive to porn. So Will makes a valid point. Now, one thing that I thought, Will, is that like, I assume there has been this, and it would break my heart to hear it, but nonetheless, it probably has existed, where you had a marriage counselor in a troubled marriage, and maybe they use porn to get their marriage and their sex life back on track. I wouldn't be surprised if that's happened. I still would think that's pretty rare. And first off, it's sad that that's what fixed the marriage, but you know, it is what it is. I'm not married, so I'm going to be quiet on that one. But so I think that they would be like, there's other ways to fix the marriage. So I don't think that's a strong argument, but to say that that's probably true seems reasonable to assume that that's happened.
I'd like to ask if it matters, if there's any benefit at all. Does it matter at all?
Well,
is that even something to consider?
Yeah, well, I'd say in the context of outweighing the pros and cons, you could say, you know, for the sake of the debate, you could say that there's more benefit to it than the downside, but hypothetically. I'm not prosecuting that case, but for the sake of any debate, you want to put both sides on the table and say, well, is there an upside to it which could actually outweigh the downside?
So do we agree that there needs to be an upside?
Well, if you're saying it's something bad for society as a whole, I think it's essential to demonstrate that whether there's an upside that outweighs the downside in the context of the question.
I can think of one upside. All these people will be killing people if they don't have a way out.
Well, somebody's collecting money, right?
Yeah.
And that might be a benefit for them.
I think there'll be a lot more rape if there is no porn.
Yeah, well, there's that one. There's the like I personally, I would ban porn if it was up to me. It'd be just no, right? But I think because it's not natural. It's not a natural thing, and we are natural organic creatures, and we get overstimulated with fantasy, and it's not natural. So I'd say ban it. But the upside you could say would be it's alleviating sexual tension in the community, which is extremely important. It's so you could say possibly there's less likely to be rape because people are masturbating as opposed to carrying out fantasies in the real life. You could pardon?
Hold on. Let's try to honor the hand raising. Roby, you put your hand down, so I'm assuming you don't want to talk. You good?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, we changed the premise. My hand was up when it was porn should be illegal, so I'll wait until we get back to the point of popular and on the rise.
I thought I had my hand up.
Not that I saw. I'm going to call back to position 11B in a second. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, the one thing I'll say, and I'll be quick about this, but like I think that we've lost the point. Yet again, porn was an example for me personally of a more fundamental conception. So if it comes to the propositions, I would prefer that the propositions be geared toward conceptions of the common good. Like, so maybe a better position or proposition would be like, do we believe that there is, let's say, objective morality?
Let me cut you off. Do you have access to the document? Go ahead and put it in. Put it in as C, D, or E, and let's try to get to it. Do you have access to the document?
I don't know what document, but I'll see if I can find it.
All right, it's in the early part of the share. Actually, you know, maybe I didn't share it. Let me share it again. Copy link and the chat. Add to the chat. So I want, my goal is to actually pass propositions. So strip them down to their bare parts. Let's get some propositions that combine together to make bigger propositions. Right after Pam, I'll talk about 11B. Go ahead, Pam.
So I just want to make a comment on, I don't know, Will, I think you said it, that porn can eliminate sexual frustration, which can reduce rape and whatever. But it's also been proven that an addiction of porn can also increase the amount of rape because people want to go for the real thing. So that's one thing. The other thing is the destruction of the family unit. We're talking about it as an individual, but as a ripple effect, it causes a lot of marital problems. Well, and even relationship problems. I guess it could go beyond marital. So I just wanted to put those two things out there. And another one I was going to say is, you know, and this is going to sound probably, I don't know, like immature, but I don't really know. But, you know, where does the money, it is $1 billion business. Where, if that is eliminated, is that hurting another part of society that we are not aware of? Because I mean, I don't know where it goes and I don't know what that money does, but who knows?
I think it pays for big houses.
Probably so, but you get my point.
All right, I've got 11B in here, which hopefully won't be too controversial. Porn can be an addiction and can be harmful to the individual. Randy, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, this discussion is to try to come up with conclusions like this without, they're just, to me, you're going too narrow here. You're fundamentally, you're talking here, if you're leading towards making something illegal, let's discuss on what basis do you make things illegal? Okay, we have, it is legal in this country. If it's not legal, then you're forcing it underground. What kind of ramifications come from that? What kind of abuse comes from that? If it's not regulated, if it's not taxed, why are our legislators, why is it legal? How did they justify it? I haven't thought through all those questions. I'm not a legislator. For me to start to say that I think, you know, that if it's banned, all these reasons that we're building up here, why it should be banned, I don't know that I don't know if they're factual. I don't know if they're legitimate. I don't know if they're relevant. So I'm going to be abstaining.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it might be a good idea for us to, as we continue through this, like I've heard statements that say both porn decreases rape and porn increases rape, and neither one of them have any evidence or data. If we're talking about the morality of something, I think that's probably okay to make assertions like that. But if we're talking about like the legality of it, I would absolutely, you know, it's probably better to go, I believe it does this, if you don't have any evidence to back it up, just to kind of keep us from making these like logical fallacies.
Hopefully in the future, when these positions don't come up spontaneously inside of a meeting, if there is a process for positions to bubble up to the surface, and that process includes citations and includes references and includes studies and includes all the stuff that good science papers and stuff have, then I mean, isn't that the better way to do it, is to have all of those references and things? We've got the internet, we've got live documents, there's no reason why we don't put live links to stuff, right? So I definitely I understand Randy's frustration in we've got this big huge topic and I'm going to these very small granular parts and there's just a mountain of crap between them. and we're not cover it all. Porn is a high level topic. Bear with us, Randy, bear with us.
All right, so I have a clarifying question.
Make it quick, Brian, go ahead.
So are we trying to go like large to small? Is that, or small to large? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the process here. So are we trying to make conclusions about, broadly about what porn is, and then do this about a number of different topics, and then build up from there on, making judgment calls about things based on what they are or their constituent parts?
My intention is to try to help people find the good life. Finding the good life, finding the good life means a bunch of things, fulfillment, happiness, satisfactions and whatever. Those things come from society, come from economics, come from socioeconomics, come from a lot of different things. Those things. So I'm putting all those things out there as the larger context. But we have to, in my opinion, we have to build from the very small building blocks, lay the foundation, and eventually arrive at the bigger topics. I wish it could go a lot faster. We'll just try to do it as fast as we can. Roby, I think you're done. Go ahead, Melissa.
I think with a topic like this, it's really easy to get caught up in the subjectivity of it and to sort of squabble about our subjective opinions. But I was thinking, maybe if we are a wise society, it might be beneficial to consider the possibility that pornography use could produce some kind of quote unquote public health crisis. And that may be more like psychological health or something like that. But would it be wise of us to consider what that might look like what statistics may be increasing if there were a public health crisis, or are there other statistics that may be decreasing? What would that look like? Can we create a kind of set of reference points so that we can survey the data and then compare that to the reference points and say, hey, things are getting better, things are getting worse?
You're absolutely right. The data and the studies and the distillation of all of that is kind of where we need to go next. We can, I'm going to try to pass a few of these granular pieces that I don't think people have too much of a problem with. And we're going to eventually bump up into the things where the data that one person drags up is one thing and the other person brings up a data that points to the other thing. And that's that point of demarcation that I referenced really early, right? Is that we both have access to the internet of information. We all have access either side of this issue. We have access to all of the data that's out there, a plethora of data that's out there, and we draw different conclusions from it. We've got to be able to highlight that point of demarcation where some of us go one way and some of us go the other way in order to actually work on that particular piece. We don't have the data here today. Maybe we'll have some data for next week. Anybody's homework, if you want to bring some data for next week. I will try to leave access open to these documents to be able to put some information in there or whatever. So yes, we need the data. Yes, it's important. For position 11B, porn can be an addiction and can be an individual. Is that worded properly? Can we all get behind that one? I see some yeses coming up. Go ahead and vote now.
Okay, what if you ask the opposite question? Can it be helpful to anyone?
We can put that in there. Right now we're taking one half of that position. We're taking the that it can be harmful position. Nick, you got your hand up, but not the yes. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 1. Oops. Nader, you got the dissenting opinion. Go ahead.
My issue with that statement is that it can be harmful to individuals. It's not always harmful. So maybe that statement, I agree with the part where it says it's addictive.
Can it be
But
harmful?
it can be harmful, but in certain cases, but in cases if it's not an addiction, then it's not harmful.
I agree, and the statement doesn't make any doesn't talk about addiction, or it does talk about addiction, and it doesn't talk about that it can be helped. But this is just saying it can be an addiction and harmful.
If you put the word "can be harmful," then I would vote yes to that also.
Can be addiction
And can be harmful.
Does that change anybody's vote? I don't really, because I think the can goes for both.
Put the can.
Oh, the can goes for both. Okay. In that case, I vote yes.
All right. So I'll just change it real quick.
Yeah, that's an important correction. Yeah, good one.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. Put the can before the B.
And B can?
Right.
And so the wording is really important. I'm going to keep repeating myself. The wording is really important. We'll let Nick go before we go on to 11C.
I just want to say a couple of things that I think that, I think that there's a misunderstanding here. So there's three kind of things happening. Is that, like, I was talking about initially, the entire argument came up because I was talking about how in the West we have this radical individuality. We've lost conceptions of the common good. And so then we would talk about, now, if we have a conception of the common good, whether it be philosophical or abstract, but then also it was the idea that, like, to what degree can we enforce that legally? Porn was simply an example. So I think that we're getting lost in an example with much more important fundamental arguments. Like, my argument really isn't about porn. I think it's a good example. I do think porn should be illegal, but that's not really the point. Now, there's another thing, is it's the criterion or the method. Like, how does one develop a methodology upon which one can make these determinations? That is a collective endeavor. Our entire legal system is a collective endeavor. It's not one individual who makes the laws. That's a good thing. And so furthermore, the criterion here is that we can look at the data, the psychological data, and there's tremendous amounts of it. We could look at the data, Lee, to a large extent, though. Like, almost everybody's assuming that the data is accurate and that we know that porn has some destructive aspects of it. The other thing is that we can look at the psychological data, see that it does have negative effects, not very many positives, and then use that data as a basis to basically state that it is against the common good. So there's a criterion and a process there upon which this can be done for other areas as well. So I personally would prefer to focus not on porn. It was an example to underline the lack of the common good and possibly how to develop a criterion upon which we could determine what exactly is the common good and how do we make those judgments. Because look, we can talk morally, and I have no problem doing that, right? But at the same time, obviously, we know that there's not moral agreement. There's a couple things I'll say to Randy specifically. Actually, you had mentioned about law. The one thing I would say, and I don't know if this applies, I don't want to, but like, one of the things in law is that when Amy Coney Barrett was tapped to be Supreme Court Justice, there was a big argument about her originalist interpretation of the law. And that's a broad interpretation of the law. But one of the aspects of it is that it believes that there is a natural law theory, and that positive law reflects the natural law that is, like, inherent within nature, human nature, and that type of stuff. And then you have other people, more the social constructionists, who believe that there really is no objective human nature. They would talk about the human condition, that individuals are really nothing more than products of their environment, socially and culturally. But they would believe that positive law would create truth in a particular time and place, culturally instantiated. That there's no objective truth, but that it's just created. So the reason this matters is because I am more of the originalist or the natural law theory. I do believe there is objective human nature. I do believe there is a moral thing. And if we operate the human machine all wrong, it goes bad. You see this, I'm not trying to throw too much out, Lee, but like, I mean, St. John Paul II, right, talked about this extensively in his philosophy. He was a philosopher. And he said, if you get like a false anthropology, if you get human nature all wrong, the politics is corollary, because how we relate to each other as a society is directly related to what fundamentally we are. So are we trying to ice skate uphill? And by that, I mean, are we trying to treat the human being for what it is not? And that's a really steep hill. That's very slick ice. And we're falling, cracking our head over. Society is evaporating around us. We're being pulled apart. And then our heads are spinning around wondering what is going on. So my point, though, is that I think the more important argument would be about the methodology to determine what would define as the common good. And then also, like, do we care? Like, is radical liberty the only thing? Are we willing to sacrifice truth and our own humanity for what I would consider to be radical autonomy? If that's a trade-off that people are willing to make, I personally am not. That's all I can say. So I hope that's clear. Over.
I think the subject, we're talking about a much deeper subject here. To me, it's, at what point do we feel that collectively we limit individuals' pursuit of their personal desires?
You're absolutely right. We're going to let Will go next. After Will, I'll talk for a minute. Go ahead, Will.
Thank you. I'm just wondering sorry, I thought it was Nick. Is it Nick just spoke? Yeah, because you've got a H on your screen. So, but Nick, did you say that society, sorry, I was a bit distracted, but did you say society's falling apart, or morals are being eaten away, the fabric of morality is deteriorating, something along those lines at one point there? Sorry. And if so, could you clarify how you mean that?
I mean, I do personally believe that our moral structure, particularly in America, I can't speak to Australia per se, but I do think in America that there has been an attack on our, here you go, Lee, our Judeo-Christian foundations of like natural law theory. And so this has been going on really, I would say since the 60s, 70s, the sexual revolution was really a fundamental rejection of all the cultural norms and mainly cultural norms that pertain to, let's say, human sexuality specifically. And there have been plenty of people who are liberal or Democrats in the American sense who have written books about how, look, the sexual revolution was wrong, that when we look at the data now, because we're like 70 years plus past, that we can show that to a large extent, it didn't liberate women the way that it was intended or wanted to, or it's unclear, and that we kind of traded one prison for another to a certain extent. And so my point, though, is that I do think there has been a degradation in the morality, but I also think that the radical individually kind of has torn apart the fabric of society and community. I would agree with that. Now, they're different, and the morality contributes to the radical individuality, but it is not the only contributing factor. There's many other factors that play into that as well.
Well, see, I'd argue that sexuality and liberation of sexuality is different to pornography. They're two completely separate issues, and it's been demonstrated that in countries that are more liberal with their sexuality and more expressive of it, have far less rape and domestic violence. Sex and violence are closely linked in the brain. There's a correlation between repression of sex and sexual freedom and violence. So I think, we probably would disagree that sex should be something that we never talk about and possibly don't express our sexuality as per the Catholic teachings. Cover yourself up. And anyway, sex and pornography are completely different things. That's all.
So I agree with Nick that the discussion was really more about the common good, and that this porn discussion is a higher level topic, and we have to cover some of that foundation, that ground stuff. I don't know that we're going to cover all that tonight. I want to go through these last couple of positions here, take a vote on them. and then talk about what the future hopefully holds, a little bit of feedback on what's happened tonight. 11C, which is something I just made up. Porn use is on a spectrum. The negative end of the spectrum often comes with a great amount of harm to self and society. Is that saying too much in a single sentence?
No, I like that. That's a really good statement.
Like I said, I'm not saying anything beyond what's in there, except for the terms, the smuggling of whatever terms I am using. There is assumed definitional congruence or whatever. Is that pretty good? Hearing no objections, go ahead and vote.
But like all your conclusions are based only on the negative side of porn.
We
So
need to make a lot. We need to look at the other side too. I shared a YouTube video from a doctor who talks about some of the positive stuff. So I think there is some positives out there as well. But I am acknowledging the negative that's there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses and 1 no. Everybody get a chance to vote that's voting. 6 and 1. James or Nick, you've got the dissenting opinion. Go ahead.
I would have to see data to show that like there is no harm to any porn use. I mean, and how do you measure that? The problem you run into is that if porn is destructive to the individual, which I do believe it is, it can be destructive and we wouldn't know. So you could watch porn and it doesn't mean you're going to walk outside the door and start stealing, raping, murdering, and killing. That's just not how this works. But the idea that this could basically just weaken you, and there's no way to be able to know that. So the idea that porn use has like, that there's a positive end of it is what I would debate about furthermore. And then like, there's no data to support that there is positive aspects. So you talk about the negative aspects, which I think is pretty clear, but there's an insinuation there that there is a positive side of it. And I just disagree with that.
I would say that the continuum, I mean, with the use of the word great, now you're saying that doesn't mean that there's a good on the other side. It just means that there's not a great on the other side. It could be minor harm on the other side of that continuum. He's just saying the degree of harm can be very bad.
To me personally, the degree is somewhat irrelevant.
How would I give me something I can type in here for your dissenting opinion, or would you like to type it in?
I would just simply state, it says the use of porn is on a spectrum. I would just say, I question the existence of a positive end.
End of the spectrum.
I have a question. Or here's I'd like to pose the question. I don't think everybody will want to answer it. Who here has watched any legally produced porn? And would you like to have a discussion about all that? You know, discuss it. We're talking about legalities here. What we're going to make determinations. You know, if we're talking legislation here, I mean, let's have a full-blown discussion on it. I don't like the idea of voting on things like this with having a 5-minute discussion on it. So that's why I'm abstaining. But I'm curious. If I was going to take a survey, probably be better if we did it anonymously. Who's watched any illegal porn, and you know, what are your biggest complaints with it? Discuss it. Find out. Delve into what are the pros and cons. Not just make quick judgments and hear off the cuff judgments on it, because they may. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I can say you can generalize and which make statements that may be true for a percentage of the people that watch porn, but it certainly doesn't mean it's true for everyone. If everyone that watches porn is going to want.
Uh-oh. Did he freeze for everybody else?
Yep.
Yeah.
He said porn too many times.
Murderers, we are in trouble, right?
Randy wants to get spicy.
Randy froze up. You
I want
froze
to
up
get
there
real.
for 20 seconds or so. Randy, you froze up there for 20 seconds or so.
Oh, I did.
I accept what you're saying is you would like to have a different conversation that is not this type of a structured conversation in the deep of the weeds that I'm trying to have. I think that either of the philosophy groups should have that discussion, or we can have another night, or we can do whatever. I am on a specific task with a specific thing, so we're not going to go in that direction at the moment. Position 11D, I think Nick put in there. Porn should be made illegal only if it's proven scientifically to do significant harm to the society.
I put that one, Lee.
Oh, Nader, you put that one in? Okay. Give us a quick brief on what you were intending.
Sort of like we don't know if porn that does harm and how much harm it does. All I'm saying is that before we legislate it, it has to be done scientifically, that it does significant harm. You know, if it does a little bit of harm, I think it shouldn't be banned, because that's like the slippery slope thing, the freedoms. But somebody has to, I know Nick's going to say there's data, but it has to be, you know, if somebody presents the data that it does significant harm, only then I would support passing laws to ban it.
Nick, you get your hand up.
Define like, can you be more specific about what would quantify as significant harm? Because you said, because you even said it, if it did minimal harm, you wouldn't support it. So define what would qualify as significant.
Significant harm where it would society it will get society in trouble. Like my example of anthrax before, you know, it could kill a lot of people. So that's a good question, Nick. What is, you know, it has to be something that does a lot of harm, significant harm, and that, you know, it could be like the level would have to be, I don't know if you can quantify that, but it's, you know, it basically people are out on the streets and stabbing people because they watch porn, something like that. Otherwise, you know, it's like, what is your argument for porn being bad, you know, other than the individual, you know, it's, you know, making them depressed or whatnot. But, you know, for society, I would put the question this way: how does it harm the society as a whole? I mean, you mentioned earlier the individual persons can be depressed, you know, and that could harm the society, large society. But, you know, to me, that's like, I've watched porn for years. You know, maybe it's depressed, maybe it didn't, but it didn't cause me to go out and not do my job. It didn't cause me to have bad credit or go rob somebody. You know, it's maybe it did depress me, but it's not significant. You know what I mean?
Before Pam goes, I'll give my little comment real quick. I like what you're trying to say here, Nader. So I would vote yes for the concept, but the word significant, I have no idea how you would define that. I have no idea how a society would be able to delineate that kind of a thing. So I vote yes for the concept and no for the word. Go ahead, Pam.
Yeah.
I think ultimately he's just saying that if it is deemed, like by the medical community, to be harmful, it should be illegal. Maybe.
Harmful significantly. So you know, if it harms a person a little bit, it wouldn't justify making it illegal. But if that person then goes and you know, because they watch the porn and they go rob a bank, or they go you know, steal money to all of a sudden you have the whole society coming apart because of this, then which I doubt it does. But I mean, Lee is right. It's kind of hard to define the significance.
I think so. What if?
Let's respect the hands. Brian, go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pam, then Roby.
Yeah, I just want to comment back to what Nader is saying. And again, this is just what I'm perceiving, but it sounds like you're saying, you know, well, I have done this, or there's people that can do this and they still can function and go to work and this and that. Well, there's a couple things. And I guess why I'm abstaining from voting on some of this is because I don't I don't know what the basis of this platform, I don't really understand what we're trying to do here, because here's the thing. You're right. There are people that can watch porn and it doesn't do anything, you know, it's not going to make them go out and commit murders, but there is different levels of porn, if you just hear me out. And I'm not saying that it's significant. I'm not saying it's going to wipe out America or anything like that, but there is scientific data that the greater the level, the intensity, the roughness, the whatever of porn does cause people to go out and pursue that in society. So that's why I'm kind of like, I hear what you're saying, but I'm still thinking of the other side, the flip side of it too. And I'm not comfortable with agreeing with this statement. That's all I want to say.
But Pamela, would you then take people's freedom away because there is some data?
No.
Okay.
Not unless it was like, you know, destroying America. Like it would have to be quotation marks significant, right?
Exactly. So we're saying kind of the same thing.
Well, yes, but I guess I just kind of have to feel like I want to see that side of it posted there. But and the other thing is it does disassemble the family unit. And again, it's not going to destroy America, hopefully, but I'm just saying it is prevalent in relationship separation. So that's all I'm saying. There's two sides of it.
Before Roby goes, I want to make a comment that we're making a lot of assertions as to what the data says. And we really can't do that. I mean, we can, you know, it's our opinion that the data says this, it's our opinion the data says that, or we bring the data, we bring the studies, we link them in, and we go from there.
But is that what you are trying to do, Lee, is bring the scientific data, or are we just trying to make statements?
Both. I want to, we can, like I said, there can be trust-ish. There could be confidence in consensus, but not truth. We're all going to use our best opinions. We're going to vote. We've had dissenting opinions, so we're not voting at 100% of anything. Our standards company, our standards organization, will not try to say that we have the truth. We're just going to try to say we've got a pretty good opinion, but you should try to follow our opinion anyways because it's pretty good. That's the general thing. Roby, Will, Nick, and then I'm going to try to switch into the next gear. Go ahead, Roby.
I was going to say, at some point, we should probably determine what exactly we're talking about when we say porn or pornography. For years, art and pornography have been, there's been a spectrum of what that means, and it might help us to define exactly what we're talking about should be made illegal or what is eroding society or whatever.
Agreed. Will, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I guess, my position is that I think we'd probably be better off without porn. There's an upside to it, but I'd say that negatives outweigh the positives. There's enough lust in society and enough problems for women without guys sort of just getting indoctrinated with this imagery, and some of it's really intense and it can be addictive as well. So if I was a woman, yeah, I'd be pretty keen to get rid of it. But what I was going to say was, are we going to ban also all these games that kids are playing everywhere where they're killing people in a military situation and all these violent games which they're indoctrinating themselves with as well, which I'd say is just as big a problem, but that might be distracting, diverting.
Yep. The devil's in the details, and Melissa raised her hand, so we're not going to go to her next, but we will end on her. Go ahead, or not end, but transfer after her. Go ahead, Nick.
I'll just say one thing. Nobody's making the correlation between porn and murder. That's a false correlation. Murder and rape even, and I don't know all the details. Melissa would probably know more. But there's the idea that like those like psychopathies or those mental, just like the way that those people are wired are generally different. Like violent crime is something fairly unique that most individuals really won't do. You kind of got to be like wired for it or whatever to some extent. How that works, I mean, all the details I don't know. But so nobody's making the claim that porn is going, like if you don't have porn, you're going to go murder. If you watch porn, you're going to become a murderer. That's just like an argument that has no validity and no grounding. Nobody's making those claims in any way, shape, or form. With respect to some statistics, I have brought up some websites. didn't think, but here's a good example though. We've been talking about the damage it does to individual people watching it, but think about this too. There's also the performers. So like 88% of scenes, this is on a website, it's called Covenant Eyes. I don't know anything about the website. I don't know their financing, their motives or anything like that, but it says 88% of scenes in porn films contain acts of physical aggression and 49% of scenes contain verbal aggression. 79% of porn performers have used marijuana and 50% have used ecstasy. The amount of suffering and trauma that exists within even the pornographic actors and actresses themselves is quite high. There's another statistic, if we want some hard data, that talked about how, and this is interesting, like pornography is very prevalent in our society. Porn addiction affects about 5 to 8% of adults. People addicted to porn, this is addiction, of course, spend at least 11 to 12 hours a week viewing porn. That's a lot. Most people, it's more than an hour a day. Most people who have porn addiction say that porn hurts their personal relationships. Many conditions co-occur with porn addiction, including anxiety, depression, sex addiction, social anxiety, and substance use disorders. The prognosis of porn addiction is good with cognitive behavior therapy and counseling. They talk about some trends. So they're like, the data does say that there is some negatives. As to the positives, that I do not know. So that's just some preliminary stuff. Maybe I can post those links like in the chat, so to speak. But so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess my point though is one other thing too, is that the purpose of the argument, and Nader, this actually directly, I would say to you, is that there was a book written by Patrick Deneen called like Why Liberalism Failed. And in it, he asks an important question. And the question is that, you know, when we look at our social polarization, is this a consequence of liberalism succeeding or failing? And his conclusion is that liberalism has succeeded. So the social polarization is a consequence of the liberal order. So what I am talking about is really challenging the liberal order. And the liberal order is the air that we have all breathed from the moment that we were born, that individual freedoms cannot be infringed. So what I am doing is bucking the system. The purpose of the porn discussion was to show individuals exactly how like dependent and even like natural this defense of individual rights, even with respect to behavior that has negative effects is. So yet again, this was an example to kind of show people how the conception of the common good within a liberal order has been eroded. And Nader, I mean, you're almost the way that you respond to it is that you are massively reluctant to infringe on individual rights. And I get it. I do get it because I'm also a product of liberalism. Both sides do this for the way. I mean, you can talk about the gun issue, let's say, particularly on the more on the left. Like there are plenty of Democrats who do want to take and constrict and restrict guns, but that's a different issue. Yet again, I want to be clear though that the purpose is to like talk about just the liberal conception of radical autonomy at the sacrifice of the common good. Over.
Melissa, you get the last word for this section.
Yes,
Vote on it. Go
I
ahead.
am stoked. I was just going to point out one thing, but since Nick brought up some good points, so I just want to add on to that. If we say that watching porn is not hurting anyone, let me just tell you that based on all of the data that I've seen, and I've studied this for actually probably like 15 years, that's a lie. You are hurting people. The vast majority, we're talking 80 to 90% of females who are in pornography videos, whether that is high production videos from California or just homemade stuff. These are females who have histories of sexual trauma. So you are contributing to their sexual trauma. And you can say like, well, you know, they're doing this of their own volition, and that is true, but you're still complicit. You're still participating in it, right? So that's a choice you're making of your own volition too. So I think it's seductive to sit back and think that this is a harmless act, but it's not. The average lifespan of a female in the porn industry is 34 years old. That's about how long they live. And that's partly because almost all of them are on hardcore drugs, because that's the only way that you can produce that kind of material. I mean, it's very difficult to produce that material sober. So they are drugged out of their minds. They have doctors who illegally give prescriptions for narcotics and all kinds of stuff like that. Beyond that, I think it's important to point out that, Pornhub every year, they give a list of the trendiest searches for, a calendar year. And since I think 2014, so for almost a decade, some of the top searches are things like mom, stepmom, stepdaughter. So what does that mean? That means searches are trending towards incest. In Las Vegas, and this was actually a number of years ago, the average age of a prostitute in Las Vegas, which obviously is I don't know, maybe the capital of illegal prostitution, but the average age of a prostitute was about 25 years old. Now it's 15, and it's because of sex trafficking and because that's what the market demands. Men want very young girls. So the data, the stats are very clear. We already have a serious problem, but we're turning a blind eye to it because it's much easier to do that. We like to be hedonistic, and look, I mean, there's a place for that, right? And I'm not advocating that we criminalize the production and distribution of pornography because I believe in freedom. But at the same time, I don't think that we should sit back and be, blissfully ignorant while people are being seriously harmed by this, including us who view it.
All righty, we have Brian, is it quick?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's about the process, really. I posted it in the chat.
About the whole process?
Yeah, well, it's just about, so we're getting stuck on, well, I don't necessarily agree with this, or I don't necessarily agree with that. So what I'm wondering is if we change it to, like I said in chat, like, what if we change the consensus to, I agree that it generally has a more negative effect on society. And then maybe we can get through more of these of just casting a vote. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's bad. Like generally bad, like not without anybody saying any definitive or getting stuck on the minutia about things, but maybe it's easier for people to kind of digest that. Yeah, that's generally kind of bad, or yeah, that's generally kind of good. Just a
Right.
suggestion.
Understood. Good suggestion. I think we're going to, what I want to do is I want to vote on 11D and then move into more of what you're just talking about, Brian, as far as the process and what's going on and what's going to hopefully happen next weekend or next Wednesday. Currently, 11D says porn should be made illegal only if it's proven scientifically to do significant. I added can get society in trouble, harm to the society. Let's just vote on it the way it is. I'm going to vote no because of the wording, but I like the concept. Go ahead and vote now.
I do agree. I voted no, but I do like the concept, and that's pretty much fundamentally my argument. I do think it's a little ambiguous, but so the concept isn't bad. So like, if this does not pass and the answer is no, we should definitely like bold it or italicize it, because even though the statement may be rejected, the principle and the idea behind it is fundamentally good.
So if I'm a no, that's 3 no's, 1, 2, 3 yeses, 3 and 3.
Reword it.
Pardon?
I think we should reword it for a consensus. Maybe at another time.
Yeah, we'll do that another time. All right, so that one wouldn't be enough to pass, which is fine. All right, so let's go into the next little section here. Stop sharing that one. One moment, please. Somebody go this one. Let's do this one. All right, just a debriefing. And the debriefing would include kind of what we're talking about for next time. I want to first start off with the common good. That's something that Nick brought up countless times. And I agree that the debate on individual liberties versus societal liberties is kind of where we should go next. What do you think? The common good, that part is going to undergird or whatever the word is, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about, because the balance between individual rights and freedoms and societies, the common good rights and freedoms and whatever, we got to get that part right. If we can make progress on that particular piece, I'm pretty optimistic that a lot of these troublesome issues we're going to be able to chew through. That's just an optimism, you know, it's just a hope. But I don't think that there is. I think it needs to be handled next. What do you guys think?
Sounds good.
I think I'm good with.
When it comes to the porn topic, I think we need to do several things. I think we need a definition. We need to resolve. We need to resolve the common good before getting back to the porn topic. I think that we need to bring the data. Now, bringing the data, I'm referring to some kind of a shared resource that doesn't disappear when the meetup call goes over. Some kind of a shared resource with the links to pertinent media, pertinent data. I think that we need to talk about the scientific method and use that as our process. And like I said, I know that scientific papers often have a a confidence score at the top, and the confidence score is oftentimes in the 90s, but is not always in the 90s. Can somebody confirm that? You guys know what I'm talking about as far as scientific paper, their confidence scores? No?
I don't know what you're talking about, Lee.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's normally a 95.
Right. So, which means it's not 100%. It's the scientific method putting stuff out for peer review lets other people tear it apart. And some of these papers are just so hard to read because they got just citation, and they're just a big mess. But we can tell that the devil's in the details, and I think we need to, over time, go down those paths. So we need to bring the data. We need to come up with the links. We may need to somehow build a case before we debate it. Maybe there's building two cases. We need to maybe have some more stuff because porn is such a heavy topic with the dependent stuff that goes underneath it. obviously we just got into the weeds a little bit here. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I would just simply state, I would add for the common good, I would add, let's say, positive and negative liberty would be a good thing. Because when we talk about liberty and our freedoms, I think it's good. And there's tremendous amount of philosophy that's talked about positive and negative liberty, or like different types of freedom. So I think that's important. The necessity of virtue. And then, you could type in the necessity of virtue. And then for 3, and these all interlink, the idea that they're completely independent is just not true. The third one that I would say is there objective morality? Like, because, and I don't mean that in every sense, but like, is there any particular action that we can say is objectively true for all people? Because that's incredibly, I think, important to understand, because that's kind of a lot of what undergirds it. Furthermore, I agree too, when you have, because we just moved underneath the scientific method, I agree that the scientific process is about seeing what psychologists actually do say about these particular things and the consequences thereof. So this also goes to that idea of like developing like a method or a criterion to like actually judge what we could define objectively, right? And keep in mind too, like that's there to basically kind of shy away from this idea that all morality, these things are just this subjective thing. It's like we have to make an objective standard that we can all agree on. So even though we might not necessarily agree on what porn is, yada, 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 the idea that we can agree that, look, clinical psychologists have come to conclusions that it's bad. Furthermore, with respect to the data, Lee, I'll look into it this week to see what I can find. And Melissa would probably be better, but I'll look into it as well to the degree that I can. But there have been a lot of people who have been writing about this, who have like, they are psychologists, who have read the actual papers that I probably wouldn't understand. And so I'll see if I can basically distill some data sets from them. I will try to also be honest and find dissenting opinions, basically people who are saying, no, porn's perfectly fine, or we haven't done enough research, or these studies are too small sample size, et cetera, et cetera. So I will look at the opposite as well, because that is important to understand. So I do agree though, that the porn topic should probably be tabled, because yet again, I was using that as an example. I think we got bogged down in an example that was fairly superficial. I wasn't trying to make that the topic of discussion. Over.
Roby.
Yeah, I think kind of to reiterate what Nick was saying, but then also something that might be beneficial for us moving forward would be to have like a kind of definitive list of something that we call like foundational principles versus secondary issues. So there are going to be these things like morality, society, common good. These are going to be these building blocks that no matter what, if we start talking about super specific issues like abortion or gun control or parenting or whatever, we're going to come back and have to use these words of these foundational principles of morality or whatever. So if we can clearly, like, if we can knock out the foundational stuff out of the way, it's going to make all the secondary issues a whole lot easier for us to plow through, I think.
I am a big fan of Discord, and I can chat almost all week long about different things. I think there needs to be I need to do some homework, and if anybody wants to join me in trying to figure out some more structure and some more agenda items or whatever for next week, I definitely would encourage you to reach out to me and get some of that stuff, because you're absolutely right. The foundational stuff is going to underpin all of the issues. So we need to make some ground on some of that stuff. And I know we went in the Thinkers Club, we went like 4 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks on like free will versus determinism. I mean, there's some things, there's some foundational stuff that has been debated for years. That's been debated for 1,000 years, and that we're not going to come to a truth on, but we can try to, using what I'm kind of doing here with these chips of positions, try to get some foundational stuff set. I think determinism is true, but I also think that we are responsible for our actions. So that type of stuff we need to set up and knock down over the coming time.
I would also throw in real quick for anybody who found this like tedious, which is true, it can be tedious. Like generally I find, because I've done this with my brothers in the past, like the first 10 hours, and that it's a ballpark approximation, it can be less, it can be more, are going to be the most brutal. And so establishing, like, to get the foundational principles are always the most difficult. Once you establish some semblance of a foundation, to make like communication becomes a lot more consistent and easier and even deeper.
I would agree. That's what my gut tells me, is that it's going to be a slugfest, or it's going to be plowing through this heavy stuff. I think we'll be able to get through it and lay some foundation. And once the foundation's laid, I think we'll tear through issues pretty quick.
Well, I mean, the issues become to a large extent, if we lay the foundations properly, and certain issues might bring out defects within it, but if we lay down the foundations properly, theoretically, if we're just doing deductive reasoning from, first principles, the issue should really just basically come to, like, it's automatically deduced from just the principles, where it's like, well, we have to rule this way because these are the axioms that we stated. So the purpose, and now as to what practical application this has, that's unclear, but if one does it right, then yeah, I mean, we should basically be able to come to some consensus about certain particular things.
And whatever that consensus is can be shared with the public for their benefit. And as a standard, not necessarily the truth, they can decide to accept our findings or not. If they choose to accept our findings, then they'll find it useful and they'll share. If they don't, they won't, and that's no harm, no foul. This is, I guess, as good as time as any to cap it off. Any final comments before we end it up? Thank you ever so much, everybody. Randy, I know this format was a bit harsh for you, I think, but hopefully you stick with it. Hopefully I see you next week.
I always enjoy discussion. Always enjoy it. We live, we learn.
Although it was rough, do you see that we can make progress, even if it's slow, that we can make some progress on some tough issues?
Well, yeah, if you keep talking, you have to, you bring out all the thoughts, and people hear things they weren't aware of, and things are challenged. And so, yeah, it's a process.
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you ever so much. Let me, where's my mouse at?